anything, I need to know how to pronounce your name correctly because my little sister's name is Ricky. So I want to call you Ricky, but I suspect that's not what you want to be called.
I love that. I love that. No, it's Rikimah.
Rikimah. Awesome.
That's right.
Awesome. Rikimah, tell us about your fempreneur journey. Like, how did you become a fempreneur?
Yeah, I mean, it is. I think it's been a work in progress my entire life. I think. I mean, when I talk to folks who knew me as a child, they say, "No, no, we knew you'd be the boss. No, 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 no. There was no confusion that you were going to go out and try and conquer the world." But when I originally got out of college, my only dream was just to go get a good job because I was coming from an under-resourced background, and so it was just like, no, you need a job. You need to make sure your academics are on lock. But while I was working the job, I kept saying, God, I got a lot of frustration because I feel like they're not listening. They're not listening. You brought me in because I've got this background. You brought me in because I know what I know. You know I'm a researcher. You know I can figure any and everything out, but you won't listen. And I sort of allowed myself to endure that for quite some time. And then one day I woke up and was like, Akima, what's going to bring you joy? What is serving you? What's not serving you? And the answer for me was, I need more agency. I need more autonomy. And I need the space to be able to dream and to dream big about whatever my purpose in this world is supposed to be. And so I closed my eyes, took a leap of faith, talked to my 12-year-old son, who was not 12 at the time, and I said, hey, son, how we doing? You got some faith in me or no? Because whatever happens, if this doesn't work out, it's impacting you too. So what do you think? And my son has always been team mom, and he was like, Mom, do it, go for it, go for it. And I jumped straight on into the first thing that I was doing, which was infrastructure consulting. So consulting on the finance, human resources, international operations kind of envelope. And then when I got exhausted with that, I was like, you know what? You need to live more in the purpose that you feel like is true for you. That landed me in wellness, to which then we opened up something else that had to do with wellness retreats. And then most recently, it was, oh, you love all things wellness and people. But the thing that really, really wakes you up every day is travel. You travel incessantly, and you want to bring that learning and that experience and all of that power to the collective masses. And so then we bought a travel franchise. So all of it has been about, what does it look like to self-actualize? What does it look like to push the envelope? What does it look like to believe when you're, around naysayers, right?
Right.
And also, what does it look like to remember and to be reminded that, like, the next generation is watching? And if we're ever going to break these patterns in our families, if we're ever going to show them that a different way is possible, sometimes that change has to start with you. And in my family, it's been me. So
That's awesome. I want to talk about your family a little bit for a sec. So you said that growing up there was a lack of funds. You didn't see a lot of abundance. Tell us more about that, and how you were able to even dream of being an entrepreneur that was successful when you didn't see a lot of that growing up. How did you kind of bridge that gap?
yeah, yeah. I mean, so I, for half of my life, was literally living in the projects. And so when I say under resourced, I mean severely under resourced, ketchup sandwiches even under resourced, lights being turned off under resourced, right? And that was pretty much what I was familiar with up until middle school, when I went to go stay with my dad, and things changed a little bit because he was more stable. He was a teacher at the time. And so life was a little bit different at that time. But I remember as early as 6 years old saying to myself, I don't want this life for me. And I recognize my parents can only do what they can do, right? They are up against lots of things, including everything in society that we all know, right? And what can I do to not have to be like this, though? Because this existence doesn't allow for me to do a little bit of anything. I mean, our biggest, exciting points were when the fire trucks showed up with gifts for all the kids, or when the 4-H programs went into the community to remind us that doing drugs and not spending our time wisely wasn't a good thing for us, right? Or when DARE was introduced, and I just knew the slogan, try out the pianist resistance education, right? I still remember it, this old. Those are the highlights. And I kept saying, okay, these people came and made a big difference in my life. I need to make sure that I pay it forward and do something different. Sometimes people ask me, what was the difference, right? I come from a family of 6. I'm number 4. I was the first one to go to college. I was the first one to do everything that I've done. Right.
Yeah.
And then my brother came shortly after that. And then my sister decided that she was also going to take a different route, but successful nonetheless. And people say, what was the difference? And all I can say was, I think I was covered. That for me was divinity. That for me was the universe and God conspiring with me, because there was nothing else that was different besides the universe looking out for me. And then I do think that having the mind to say, I need different, I want different, and then to go and explore and to not be afraid. Because I think that's the one thing my parents gave me was the deep, 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 I think, skill at even in the midst of things that should freak you out and make you scared, you do it anyway because it's what you need to do. So even when I talk to my son, in real time, I say, just because you're scared doesn't mean you don't do it. When you're
Mhm.
scared is when you really got to lean in and you got to take a leap of faith. And so while I'm not a super religious person, I'm a super spiritual person. And I tell people all the time, I listen to my spirit. When my spirit said it was time and enough was enough, enough was enough.
Yeah. That's awesome. Wow, that's so inspiring. Oh my goodness, this is so amazing. I'm so glad we're having this conversation. I know there are, tens of thousands, if not millions of women out there that need to hear what you're saying today. So when you were like, okay, I'm going to start my own business, take us back and tell us a few of the things you had to do tangibly, like
Yeah,
tasks, as well as maybe asking for help.
yeah.
And so, you've done a great job of teaching us about the mindset and the way you think and the things you've had to do up here. But now I want to know more of those tangible tasks and just things that you have to do to get a business set up for our femcare listeners who are maybe at that
That's
stage.
right. That's right. So when I decided that I knew I was going to have to go off on my own, I also started testing out the water. Some of
Mm,
that was because I was like, am I just dreaming? Or is this really a thing and it's possible? Some of it was that I looked around and saw people who didn't look like me able to survive and make money on consulting and doing other things outside of the traditional 9 to 5. And I found myself studying what I was seeing, asking those guys the questions. How did you draft that contract that made the org feel like they should pay you like that? And what background do you have? Because I was finding that a lot of people who were in these roles, these consultancy roles, and that were working for themselves, didn't even have my background. I'm a person with 2 master's degrees, one in business, and in my mind, I couldn't wrap my mind around how did you even get the confidence to just decide one day, yes, you're going to pay me $300 an hour. Like what?
mm,
Right? And so some of it was the research, some of it was looking around, taking stock, asking people those questions, not looking at people and saying, I can't ask you because you don't look like me. I can't ask you
mm.
because we don't come from the same communities, right? It was, I'm asking because you don't look like me and you don't come from my community, which means I need to know what you know that I don't know.
Okay.
Right? So I spent a
Yeah.
lot of time doing that kind of research. I think I spent a good year, 2 years doing that. Then I started talking to other organizations and asking them, hey, look, this is my background. I'd love to be of service. I'd love to help. Keep me in mind if you ever think that you need support. Keep me in mind because I'm definitely open to freelance work. And then the day that I actually decided that, you know what, I can't do the micro contracts and do the job at the level I need to, I literally looked up how am I going to set this business up. I'm an efficiency person, and so the first time around when I set up a business years ago, I did it myself. Went through the government, went through the state, went to the IRS, got learned in on the process around what it looks like to set up a sole proprietorship, what taxes I needed to care about, what forms I had to care about. The next time around I did it though, I said, I need to look for entities that specialize in setting up businesses because I don't want to spend my energy there. I'd rather spend my
Yeah.
energy on marketing materials, thinking about how am I going to get leads, right? And so I ended up hiring LegalZoom to help me with one of my first companies. And that took the burden off of me of having to pretend that I was a specialist and remembering to talk to the comptroller of the state that I was living in at the time, or to file for a 501c3, nonprofit exemption application through the IRS. I didn't want to be that specialist, but I knew it needed to be done.
Mhm.
So for a very small fee, I hired those guys to help me get started. And then the second person I hired was a bookkeeper, a CPA kind
Mhm.
of person. because what I didn't want to do is run into problems legally around how we're tending to and taking care of resources that come in. And then the last thing I did was I hired myself a strategic tax person because I needed to understand what are these taxes that I'm paying and why. And
Yeah.
am I supposed to pay all those taxes or am I not? Right? And if I am, are there smarter ways to work with money so that I can continue to build? Because I was discovering in year one that most of all of my money was going to taxes because I didn't have vehicles for that money that I was starting to make. And that came
Right.
from a lack of financial literacy, which came from my youth, right? So fast forward to maybe 5 years ago, I knew along the way as I continued to build businesses, Rikimah, you've got to get financially literate. Rikimah, you've got to understand the tax codes. You've got to understand, where are the silver lining parts for a small business owner who is not going to stop here, right? And those were some of the ways that I started thinking about, setting up business and also making sure that my bicycle rack, we call it, or my kitchen cabinet had a lot of the key players I needed to help me be successful and to learn on the fly.
Right. So you made sure you had the team players, those couple of people that specialize in those areas, so you didn't have to know everything.
Right.
You also dove into the knowledge piece when it came to financial literacy,
That's right.
and that's really good to hear because I do think sometimes newer entrepreneurs feel so overwhelmed, so they end up hiring people to do things that don't get value from it because they don't understand what they were hired out.
Right. That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
That's
good for you for the way you went.
for sure.
Awesome. So where you are right now? Where are you in the world?
So you said where am I? Who?
Where are you right now?
So I'm on the East Coast. I'm in Maryland, USA.
I have been
Have
there.
you? Okay. It's cold.
I have been.
Yeah.
That's a great place. Oh my gosh, what a lucky lady you are to live there. It's beautiful.
I love the state of Maryland. I mean, every time I leave the country, because we have left the country to live overseas also several times. And every time we come back, I always end up back in Maryland. And people say, well, why do you keep going back there of all of the states you can live in? And I said, because it's a happy medium of the things I care about. Between values and morals and the way the state shows up and the way that it, tries to take care of us all, I think it is a place that I think represents the types of values and morals that I walk with in the world, I would say.
Yeah, I was lucky to be able to speak in the city at the Maryland State Bar Association conference. So I was speaking about marketing there. It was such a pinch me moment. So I love that. I love that state as well. And that's not where you grew up,
No. I grew up in California.
right?
California.
So you went to the complete other side.
Well, yeah. I mean, when I was coming up, one of the things that I discovered when I was 24 was I was living in a state that was as beautiful as it was. I wasn't surrounded by people I identified with, mostly because I'm not a very sort of easygoing, sort of sit by the beach drinking smoothie type gal, right? Like that's not my world. I don't want to be an actress. I don't. And so I found that the pace was too slow for me in California. And I do need a bit of a revved up kind of environment. The East Coast pushed me to be the best version of myself all the time because this section of town is latent with competition, latent with super smart, talented people who are all trying to fight for something, right? And so for me, I found more meaning being on this side of town where I was surrounded with people who actually cared about what else is going on in the world because that's my lean in life, right? Whereas my dad, we just moved him here last year, January, born and raised in California. That's his jam. That's where he wants to be, right? Even though he cares about things, that place allowed for him to sort of do his thing the way he wants to do it. So at 24, I packed all my things up on my 24th birthday, didn't tell anybody I was moving permanently, and I left with 2 suitcases. And I never went back after that.
And where did you go?
I went from California and I moved straight to Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Wow. And did you have connections lined up there? Did you have anything waiting for you there? People you knew?
Nobody. I didn't have family. I didn't have friends. I didn't even have allies or I didn't know anybody here. And I essentially came here without a job, without anything, straight out of uni. And I said, listen, you're going to work any job you're going to get until you find that opening. So I went to work at Pier 1 and a law firm because together it allowed me to make the money I was after. And it
Right.
just so happens that I went to a networker, ran into the right person who said, "Wait, you have an MBA? You want to work in finance and HR? Oh, great. Why don't you come interview with us?" And that was the beginning of both my entire career.
Wow, that's so cool. I don't you love how those conversations that just God definitely does that to you? They're like, "Yep, this is happening." And you're like, "I couldn't have made that happen if I wanted
It's
to."
true. And because it was such a big opportunity, I literally had to take myself to the University of YouTube just to refresh myself on what to do because I was only out of uni, right? Like I didn't have any formalized real life experience in the work I was going into. But someone saw a thing and said, "We're gonna give you a shot." And I was unwilling to let the shot go to waste, reflecting on where I come from, reflecting on how hard it would be to dig out of all of that. And so I said, "Nope, you're gonna make it count because you got one shot." And it literally propelled my entire career after that point.
Awesome. Well, Rikima, that is a really exciting story so far. I know that I could ask you a million more questions, but I'm curious to know about the mom piece because I too have a son. My son is a huge football fan actually, and the Baltimore Ravens. That's his team. So, is your son a football fan?
No, no, he's a swimmer.
Oh,
He's a
cool.
swimmer, so he swims on the team here in Maryland, one of the national teams here. And swimming became his thing because he could do it all over the world. So my son has traveled to 70 plus countries in his young life. And every country we have been to, it has been about getting in the water because for the most part, it's been very hot. So he mastered his swim strokes everywhere we went. So he's a swimmer. When he's not doing that, he used to do gymnastics. He plays tennis, and he's only now learning basketball and football, but he has always swum.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's really great. And what about you? When you're not in the grind, doing the work, doing all the business things, what kind of hobbies and I don't know what kind of stuff do you get up to?
Yeah. So I love to travel. I'm 122 countries. And so literally I breathe, sleep it, wake up talking about it, which is how this travel venture showed up, right? So when I'm not traveling, I'm writing books. I write wellness books also for a living. And that has a lot to do with just trying to pass the knowledge forward in a way that is affordable for people. Because when we hold our retreats, not everybody can gain access to it because of the price point, for example. And so when we're not doing that, I'm actually hanging out outside with these kids. I'm like the neighborhood auntie here. And the reason for that is because I see myself as someone who's supposed to be looking out for the wellness of the kids in the community also. And so when they're outside, I'm ordering hot chocolate, I'm bringing out a box of snacks, I'm mediating conversations and conflicts. And it's the thing that brings me the utmost joy. So, yeah.
That's awesome. That's so great. So tell us about retreats. How did that start? I know you've had a passion for travel, but how did you turn that into part of your business?
Yeah, so the retreats came out of the long career in human resources and international people work. And so in doing that work over the years, I just kind of realized that like there's no sacred space for our generation, but also like the type of workers that I'm specifically talking about. Because I tend to work with folks who are freedom fighters and social justice activists and heavy political types of folks and stuff. And so they're walking around carrying a lot of secondary and tertiary trauma in their bodies because of the work that they do. So I wanted to create a space that was unique for them so that they could both be in a safe space with a person who's a fellow activist who's been in this work. And then also because the tradition of human resources wasn't working for them. And how that came about was because I was doing one-to-one coaching. And over the years, I just discovered people keep talking to me like I'm a life coach, not like I'm their professional coach, like their career coach. And a lot of it has to do with my commitment. I'm more committed to humanity than I am to organizations. And that became true and very clear, crystal clear, maybe about 10 years ago. So the retreats were born out of a need to create that space and to focus on the human and not on, dues or bot, you got to do this work. And so let me get you just well enough so you can do what the boss wants. And instead it's like, no, I want to talk total wellness with you. I want to see, how are you doing? How is your family? How are your finances? How's your spirit? Right? How's your friendship levels? And to get back to some of that very basic stuff that I think as kids we knew was important, but as working adults and folks who have families now and spouses, I think sometimes we lose sight of because we don't have a lot of time to think about self and to center self. So those retreats are about centering self, so that we can be our best versions of ourselves. So that when we go back to our families and our kids and stuff, we can demonstrate that, walk in that, and also pay it forward to them too. So yeah, and I take those retreats all over the world. We've had them in Barbados, we've had them in Turks and Caicos. Now we're planning some Be Fit, Be Well retreats for Thailand. And so, we're trying to, I think, both center on the individual's journey into wellness and also prioritizing environmental wellness, because so many of us are feeling unwell because of the environments we're in and because of the things that are happening in that environment. And that's, I think, a head nod to my upbringing.
Nice. So who is your ideal client? Like, what stage of the game are they at in their organization? What role do they play in the organization? Do you work with solopreneurs, or do you more so work with people that have many people under them? Tell us about the kind of clients you're looking to attract.
Yeah. So, I mean, I typically work with folks who are just getting into their career, mid-level career, or folks who are sunsetting their careers. They're different retreats, different coaching, but that's the sort of gamut that I run. And I literally work with a little bit of everybody. I mean, there are folks in my community right now that I'm working with that I don't work with on a regular basis, that I've just met, right? But they are probably going through life transitions. Like some are, retiring. Some have been laid off through the pandemic. Some of them are still trying to figure out what it means to be well and to have multiple toddlers in the household, right? Some are headed into divorces. So there's lots of different kinds of people, but the age trajectory tends to be somewhere between that like 35 to 70-year-old mark. That literally is the gamut that I'm working with and have been for the last few years.
Right. And so they're coming to you to what's their key pain points that they're looking to have your help with resolve?
I think it is the wellness. I think people are trying to figure out what is making it so that I'm feeling like I'm not at my best. Sometimes it's occupational wellness, because to think about wellness, there's 8 pillars to wellness. Occupational is one of them, right? Some folks, their spirituality is suffering because COVID left them in a dark place, or because they're battling with mental health crisis, right? And so it's just different parts of the wellness wheel that we are working in. Now we are sort of, engaging in the physical part of the wellness wheel, right? So it's about physical well-being and physical health. But a lot of times, I'm one of the first phone calls when people are having suicidal ideations, even, right? And so it looks very different depending on who it is.
Right. Awesome. And so how can people get in touch with you? Where's the best place to connect with you, Rikimah?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So folks can always go to the website. We've got the Be Well 365 website there, where we do lots of coaching and retreating and all of those things. And if that fails, my number is absolutely online. And so they can also reach out via email or by phone. And then we've got Instagram and we've got Facebook also, to which we actively monitor as well. So is that's helpful? We've got lots of different ways, essentially.
Right. So we'll make sure to link to your website and the Instagram in the show notes. And you said it's bewell365. Is that .com?
It's .org.
.org. Gotcha. Okay, fantastic. Now, one last question I like to ask all of my podcasts. This one. What would you tell your 10-year younger self? 10 years ago, Rikimah, what would you tell her?
Believe in your faith, believe in yourself, and trust your spirit.
Nice. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to leave our Fempreneur listeners and viewers with before we hop off?
Yeah, I mean, just the point that it's all hard, right? Like, but life is hard. Raising a family is probably the hardest job I've ever had, right? Even as an entrepreneur, we know that struggle. We've got to find clients. We've got to make sure that everything pans out. Still, being a parent is harder than that. So for our friends and family out there who have families, it's like, don't be dissuaded by this, though, because you're already doing the hard part. Your parents. And then also, a lot of us are daydreamers, but if you really are dreaming about it and it's something that you can't shake, chances are it's because your spirit is like, hello, let's get to work. We got things to do. And so that's why I always lead with trust your spirit, because for me, at least in my life, and from those that I've counseled, The spirit doesn't lead you astray. It's our minds that then tell us what we can or can't do, not our spirits. But I believe everybody can get it done. I think it's just, sometimes timing is not right. Right. For me, early on, it took time. And I had to learn a very valuable lesson around not rushing what isn't meant for me in that moment, but also not giving up and finding other creative ways to do the things that bring me joy. And so that's what I would say. We got one life to live. Do what brings you joy. Do what makes you happy.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. And yeah, I've just really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm glad we're connected now. And I hope you have a really fabulous 2024.
Absolutely. You too. Thanks for having me.